Between April 19th and May 3rd, 1920, the Jewish community of Mandatory Palestine, or the Yishuv, held its first election for the Assembly of Representatives. This election had been a long time coming. As far back as the 1880s, there had been a growing movement for European and Middle Eastern Jews to return to their ancestral homeland. In 1896, a journalist and author named Theodor Herzl took this even further by proposing the creation of a Jewish state, in imitation of the various nationalist movements throughout Europe at the time. This early Zionist movement suffered immense setbacks, not least because the ancestral Jewish homeland, then known as Palestine, was part of the Ottoman Empire, which prohibited Jews from buying land. However, the Zionist movement gained more support during World War I. In 1915, the Yishuv was witness to the Armenian Genocide, which convinced the Zionist movement to support an Allied invasion. That invasion took place in 1917, at which point the incoming British announced their support for the re-establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine. One of the soldiers in that British invasion was David Ben-Gurion, who had been expelled from the Ottoman Empire at the beginning of the war. Upon his return, Ben-Gurion established the Yishuv's first political party, Achdut HaAvodah, but there was soon competition in the form of Hapoel Hatzair. Ideologically, they were both social democratic parties, but Ben-Gurion's status as a war hero made Achdut HaAvodah much more popular among the urban working class, whereas Hapoel Hatzair's support was more rural and included more artists and intellectuals. Its leader, Aaron David Gordon, was all three of those things. The Yishuv immediately moved towards elections for an autonomous government, but this was pushed back for an additional 3 years, as Palestine's final status after the war was not assured, and the Jewish representative to the peace process, Chaim Weizmann, worried that elections would expose partisan divisions within the Yishuv that would undermine his negotiating ability in the ensuing Treaty of Sèvres, which broke up the Ottoman Empire. Once it was confirmed that Palestine would be a British mandate, elections were announced to take place on April 19th, except in Jerusalem where they would take place on May 3rd. In a radical move for the time, the Yishuv decided that elections would take place using party list proportional representation. Instead of choosing local politicians to represent them, the people would vote for entire parties, whose share of seats in the assembly would be allocated by their share of the total popular vote. But other than Achdut HaAvodah and Hapoel Hatzair, strong political parties didn't really exist yet. So most parties just organized around their existing labor unions. One of them didn't even decide on a name. Controversy immediately erupted over the issue of women's suffrage. At this time, women were getting the vote all over the world, and the leadership of the Yishuv insisted that women be allowed to vote in this election. But this was vehemently opposed by the ultra-Orthodox or Haredi community. Although the Haredi community largely opposed the idea of a Jewish state, their support of the assembly was needed to give the body legitimacy, because the Haredim comprised the majority of the old Yishuv, the Jewish community that had lived in Palestine before the Zionist movement. So a compromise was arranged by which votes for the Haredi party would count double to make up for the lack of women voters. And here are the results. Coming in first place was Ben-Gurion's Achdut HaAvodah with 70 seats, followed by the Sephardic Organization with 54, the Haredi party with 53, and Hapoel Hatzair with 41. Altogether, 314 representatives were elected, one for every 80 voters. The First Assembly of Representatives met on the 7th of October 1920 to elect the Jewish National Council as the executive government of the Yishuv, with Jerusalem nobleman David Yellin as president. Although the assembly did not have any official majority and minority factions, Achdut HaAvodah and Hapoel Hatzair dominated, setting a precedent for strong ideological parties in future elections.